Welcome to the Database Creation Participation Project for the WV K-12 Education problem. In this project, we're going to look at how to import data into an Access database, and we're also going to see how we can create tables using Design View. To get started, I've downloaded and extracted the provided data file zip for this project, and you can see the files that are inside of that zip here. We have 4 XML files. Each of these corresponds with a table we're going to import into our database, and then there's also a 5th CSV file that we're going to import as a table as well. To get started, let's create a new Access database, and for that I'm going to go ahead and start up Access. We want to go and create a blank database for our project. So I'm going to click this blank database option here, and it's going to ask me what I want to call my file, but also where is it supposed to go. By default, it's going to place it in the My Documents folder. I'm going to go and click the little file folder icon here and specify that I want to place it on the desktop so that it's easy to find. You can place it wherever you would like, of course. Desktop is just my preference for right now. The instructions give us the file name to use. It's going to be education_ppdc _wvkep.accdb. .accdb is the extension used for Access databases from Access 2007 and newer. Really old Access databases had a .mdb extension, but that's not what we want. We want accdb. Go ahead and click OK. So you can see it's got this file name and it's going to place it on my desktop. So I'll click the Create button. By default, when you create a new database in Access, it's going to open up with this Table 1 inside of Datasheet view. This Table 1 doesn't have any data in it. It's intended as a starting point for you to work with. What I would suggest you just do is close it. And when you close it, it's actually going to go away from the Objects pane here. I tend to prefer going and just creating the new databases that I want myself in Design View rather than working with that Table 1 that Access starts off with. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import some data so that we have tables to work with. To import data, we need to go to the External Data ribbon, and we're going to go to New Data Source, and in this case we're going to grab From a File. I'm going to indicate that I want to import from an XML file for the first couple of imports we're going to do. I need to tell it where it can find this file. So I'm going to browse, and I'm going to go to my desktop here and go to this data files ppdc wvkep folder where I went and extracted the data file zip. I'm going to start off by importing districts.xml. So I can just double click on the file name. It's going to populate the path here, and then I can tell it OK. This import XML window is going to show me what's in that file. Potentially you could have multiple tables inside of the file, but in this case we just have one table. It's called districts, and it has these two fields, district and region. These XML files that are going to be imported here all contain both the structure. It contains essentially the design of a table, and they also have some data in them for the tables that are going to have data. The analysis questions ones are just structure only. What we can do here, though, is that even if a file has, for example, structure and data, we don't have to import everything. We can tell it that we just want the structure, we just want the table itself with no records. We can tell it we want the structure and data, and that's the default option. That's going to be the table design and any records that it contains. Or we can tell it to append data to existing tables. This would be if you already have a table that's set up with that name and you just want to add additional records to it. In this case, I'm going to import structure and data because I need the districts table and I also need the data it contains. So with structure and data selected, I'm going to click OK. It's going to tell me that it's finished importing, and I can just go ahead and click Close. I'll see my table now shows up here, this districts table. I can double click on it to view the data that's in it, and then if I want, on the home ribbon, I can also go to Design View and see how this table is structured. I'm going to go ahead and close it out, and we're going to repeat the same process to include a couple other tables. I'm going to go back to external data. We'll go get new data source from file. We'll do an XML file here, and I'm going to bring in schools.xml, and I'm going to tell it I want structure and data as well, and we'll click close on the last step. We'll go back to new data source from file, XML file. We're going to bring in schoolstatistics.xml, and we'll tell it OK. We want structure and data, so we'll tell it OK, and then we'll click close once we finished importing that. We'll do the same thing for bringing in analysisquestions.xml, and we'll click OK. Now in this case, this one actually only has the structure. There are no records in this. There's nothing that's going to go wrong if we tell it to bring in structure and data. It's just only going to import the structure because that's the only thing that's in the file. I'll tell it OK, and we're going to tell it to close. So I have these 4 tables pulled in now. For our last import, we're going to import from a CSV file. So I'm going to go under external data to a new data source from file. For a CSV file, I'm going to tell it that I want this text file option. Things are going to look a little bit different this time. I first of all need to tell it what file do I want to import from. So I'm going to browse, and I'm going to choose this districtstatistics.csv file. I have to tell it what I want to do with the data that it's going to read in from the CSV file. Of these options that are here, the ones that you're going to use most frequently are these first 2. We're going to import the data into a new table, or either append a copy of the records to an existing table. So the append option is basically going to load the data into the table and add that information as new records. There's also this option to link the data source by creating a link table. This one is fairly uncommon. You're not going to use a third option very often. In this case here, we're going to bring the data into a new table because this is information that's intended for the district statistics table, which doesn't exist right now. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to get this import wizard here, and it's going to show me what data is in that file. The first step is going to ask, is it a delimited file or a fixed width file? With a delimited file, which is what we actually have, this is a CSV file, means it's comma separated or comma delimited values. We have a symbol, the comma, that goes and separates the data in each column. Fixed width means that each of the columns is defined to have a certain number of positions, certain number of characters, and they all kind of line up going across, which is spaces going through and taking up any extra room. CSV is going to be a delimited file, so I'll click the next step here, and I want to choose that I have a comma delimiter. So I can see this preview here, and it's taken where the commas were, and it split things up into new columns for that. Now, in my file, I have this very first row here that goes and describes what's in each of the columns. So I'm going to check the box that says first row contains field names, and it's going to use that to go and name the different fields when it goes and creates this table. I'll click next, and this is going to give me the ability to specify data types for each of my fields and names for the different fields. It went through and started off with the names from that first row since I checked that box there, and in my case they're all good as they are. Sometimes you might need to tweak the names. For example, if you have a name that contains a space in it, you might want to get rid of that space. We'll take a look and see. We have district is coming in as short text. That's good. School year is short text as well. That's fine. Population is coming in as long integer, which is perfectly fine as well. We need to have this be long integer rather than just regular integer because it's a whole number and it's potentially larger than 32,000. So that long integer is fine there. Dropout rate is a number that has decimal places, so we're going to use the double type for that. So it's correctly detected what options we should use for each of these different fields we're going to import. If there's ever a reason that you don't want to import a particular field, you can check this box here to say do not import the field, and it'll just skip over it. I'm going to go ahead and click the next button. In this case, Access is asking me what I want to do about a key for the table. The first option, let Access add a primary key, is going to create a new field that it's going to call ID, and it's going to be an auto number type field. So if there's no other data that can serve as a key, this isn't a bad approach to use. If you have a field that can serve as a primary key, you can just choose it right here. So I'm going to tell it, if I wanted this option, to choose my own primary key, and then I can select the field that's going to be the primary key. In this case, though, we don't have anything that can serve as a primary key. We do have two fields that can serve as a composite key. If we combine the district and the school year, that's going to give us a unique value that can serve as a key. But this wizard doesn't give me the ability to specify a composite key. So what I'm actually just going to do is tell it that I want no primary key, and I'll come back and set the composite key after we're finished importing the data. I'll click the next button, and this last step just asks me what do I want to call the table. It's normally going to use the name of the file to name the table. So district statistics is actually what we want. So we'll click finish. And then we just get this message that we finished importing our file. So we can click close. You can see we have this district statistics table now, and we've got some data in it. What I'm going to do is head over to design view for this. So I'm going to go to the home ribbon, go to design view, and I want to make district and school year be a composite key. I'm going to select both of the fields on the left side by hovering my mouse over this gray bar beside district and dragging down so I select both district and school year. And then on the table tools design ribbon, I can click the box for primary key. So you'll see the little key icon before both of these fields. That means that they're both part of our composite key. The other thing that I'm going to do, just so that it's a little bit easier to understand these values, is I'm going to say that the dropout rate should be formatted as a percentage. So when I click on the dropout rate column, it's a number and the field size is double. Those parts are right. But I'm going to go down to the format option here under the field properties, and I'm going to tell it I want to format as a percentage. That way these values will actually look like percent signs. It'll be a little bit easier to understand. Let's go ahead and save our changes. And I'm going to go back to datasheet view so we can see what our updated table looks like. So now, rather than having like 0.01, I have 1%. Let's go ahead and close out of this table. And if you went and resized anything, it's going to ask if you want to save the layout of the table. I'm just going to go tell it yes. We've imported 5 tables now, but we still need one more. And for this table, we're going to create it ourselves. To create our own table, I'm going to go to the Create ribbon, and I'm going to click on Table Design. That's going to open up this new table here in Design View. And there's instructions that tell me that I need to have 2 fields. One is going to be called School Type ABBRV, and it's going to be of type short text, and it should be my primary key. So I'll go ahead and click the primary key button. The other field that I need to have is going to be called School Type Name, and it's also going to be of type short text. I'm going to click the Save button, and it's going to ask me what I want to call this table. The name that we're given is School Types. So I'll click OK, and you can see that we have the school types here shown on our tab, and it now appears on our objects pane on the left side. We need to go and populate some records. There's going to be 11 records altogether. So I'll choose to go to datasheet view for this, and I'm just going to resize these columns so that they're a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to start typing in the records that are given in the instructions. So our first one has an abbreviation of ELS, and this is going to be an elementary school. I can just keep hitting the tab key to go between different fields and then on to the next record. So we'll have INS for intermediate school, and then we'll do the rest of them. When we're done, we're going to have 11 records. That's what we can see down here, and there's actually a hint in the instructions that tells us our table will contain 11 records. So we've got everything that we need set up here. Let's go ahead and save our changes just so that we have these resized column widths confirmed, and we'll close our table. To make it easier to enter data, we're going to modify the school statistics table to include some lookup fields. For this, we want to open up school statistics in Design View. So I'm going to right click on it and go to Design View. And there's two fields that we're going to set up here so that they have lookup options. First field is going to be school type abbreviation. So we've seen on this field properties section at the bottom here, the general tab, there's this other lookup tab. And the lookup tab normally is going to have a display control of text box. This just means that there's a spot for us to enter text. But there are some other controls that we can go and use. List box will allow us to go and look up values in another table or query, or we can actually go and enter ones ourselves, and we can select from that list when we choose what value we want. Now, I can go and manually configure things here on this lookup tab, but that's kind of a pain. The better way to go and do things is with the Lookup Wizard. So I'm going to set this back to text box, and I'm going to launch the Lookup Wizard. To do that, for school type abbreviation, I'm going to go under the data type column here, and where it says short text, I'm going to click the drop down arrow, and in the very bottom it has Lookup Wizard. That's going to launch this. And there's two options on this first step. We're going to actually work with both of them here on this table. But for this particular field, we're going to tell it that we want to look up the values from another table or query. So that first option there is what we want selected. I'm going to click Next. Here on this screen, I have to tell it where the values are going to come from. I can pull them from tables, or if I have results from queries I want to be able to select, I can go and choose the Queries button here, and then it would list any queries that I had. In this case, I'm going to pull it from tables, and I'm going to pull the data from the school types table that we just made. I'll click Next, and here it's going to show me the fields that are available in that table or query, and I can go and add the ones that I want to be displayed as part of the list. So I want to be able to display both the school type abbreviation. So I'm going to click the right arrow to go and add the abbreviation. And then the school type name I also want to display. So I'm going to click the right arrow for that one as well. So we're going to have both the abbreviation and name showing under selected fields. We'll click Next. And we're going to specify here if we want to sort. And the instructions tell us that we should sort by the abbreviation. And we can choose either ascending or descending order just by clicking the button here to toggle. We're going to sort in ascending order, A to Z order, and we only need to sort by the abbreviation for this particular case, so I'm going to leave the sort for number 2 blank. I'll click Next, and here we can choose how we want our data to look. We're probably going to want to resize things because you can kind of see, it was having some of the names cut off. We want to be able to see the full width of the name. So I'm going to drag to resize that. The other thing that I want to do here is I'm going to tell it that I do want to see the key column. By default, Access is going to hide the key column. So whichever one you have made be like your primary key, in this case the abbreviation, it's not going to show it. But we actually do want to see it here. So when I uncheck this box, I'll be able to see the school type abbreviation, and then I'll be also able to see the school type name when I choose from the drop-down list. We'll click Next again. Since I have multiple fields that are being displayed, I have to indicate which one I actually want to store in the database. It's only going to store one value in the record in the school statistics table. And since I'm working with a relationship, I want to use the value that's going to be associated with that relationship. I'm going to store the value for school type abbreviation, since that's the field in the other table that I'm related to. I'll go ahead and click Next again. And this is the last step in the wizard. It's going to ask what label we want for our field, and this is basically the name of the field. And it's just going to pick up what we had already entered. So school type abbreviation, that part is good. If we want to turn on referential integrity for the relationship that it's going to create, we can check the box here to enable data integrity. We can choose between these two options for how it should handle deletes. Cascade Delete will actually check the box for the Cascade Deletes option. Restrict Delete leaves that unchecked. I'm going to choose Restrict Delete because I don't want to run the risk of somebody accidentally going and deleting a record in the school types table and then having that destroy a bunch of data in the school statistics table. Having Restrict Delete will prevent me from doing that delete in the first place. So this is the safer option to go. If I don't enable data integrity, there's this Allow Multiple Values option. I would suggest never using this. This is something that's considered to be a bad database design practice. Don't do this. I'm going to go back here and set my data integrity and restrict delete like we said, and I'll click Finish. It's going to tell me here that the table must be saved before relationships can be created, and it's asking if we want to save now, and I'm going to tell it yes. Before you go and run the Lookup Wizard, you should make sure that you have your other tables closed, because what will happen is if you have another table that's going to be involved in that Lookup Wizard, in that relationship open, like if I had school types open, at that last step it would run into a problem. It wouldn't be able to make the relationship because the table was open, and then I'd get into a whole series of error messages. Just keep the tables closed if you're not using them. It makes things much simpler. You can see that now we have on the lookup tab here for school type abbreviation some data specified. So it's going to use the combo box display control. It's going to pull from a table query. Here's the actual query it's going to use to go and pull the data. The bound column is which one it's going to store the data from. So the first column, there's two columns there. The size that they're going to appear. It's got all sorts of different settings here we can go and modify to tweak the appearance of how things are going to look like in our drop-down list. But to actually see what things are going to appear like, let's go head over to Datasheet View. So now when I go to school type abbreviation, it's going to be a drop-down list. And I can see here those two columns that I selected as part of the wizard. I have the first one that has the abbreviation, that's my key, and then I have the name, that's the second one. So it makes it really easy for me to go and pick the one that I want. We're going to do something sort of similar for the school year. And let's head back over to Design View for that one. This time though, the values aren't going to come from an existing table. We're going to allow the user to go and choose from a list of options that we're going to type in. For school year, I'm going to go under Data Type and go to Lookup Wizard. And on the first step here, I'm going to tell it that I will type in the values that I want. I'm going to click Next. And down here at the bottom, I can actually type in the values. I can have multiple columns worth of data if I need. In this case, I just need one column. And I'm going to enter a new row for each of the different options that I want to have. So the instructions tell me that I'm going to start off with 2012-2013. And I'm just going to keep on going here. And my last record is going to be 2019-2020. I'm going to click the Next button. And it's going to ask what label I want, and we should just use the same name that we had figured out for our field. So school year is good here. Most of the time you're going to want to limit to list, which will only allow the user to select a value from that list. If you want to allow users to be able to type in their own option if they don't see one that they like, leave this limit to list unchecked. I want to make sure that people are restricted to that list, so I'm going to check the limit to list box. Again, I'm going to tell you don't use multiple values here. This is just a nightmare from a database design perspective. So we're going to leave that unchecked and we'll click Finish. And you can see here on the Lookup tab, we now have a whole bunch of values. And if we go head over to Datasheet View after we save our changes, we can see that we can choose from a drop-down list here. So this makes it a little bit easier when we're going and entering things. We can just basically click and choose what we want instead of having to type in things. This tends to make our data entry more reliable. If people can go and just choose from a list rather than having to type something in, there's less room for error. So when you can do lookup wizards like this, that's really something that you should consider as you design your database. Let's go ahead and close out of our table since we're now done modifying school statistics. The last major thing that we need to do in creating our database is to define the relationships between different tables. This is what's going to allow us to easily tie together the information from across our database when we build queries. For this, we want to go to the Database Tools ribbon, and we're going to click on the Relationships button, which is going to open up this Relationships window. Right now, there's already one relationship, and this is the one that was created when we used the Lookup Wizard. We can see that it goes between the school type abbreviation field in the school types table, and if we follow this line, I'm going to expand this box out so we can see a little bit better here, it goes to the school type abbreviation field in the school statistics table. We're going to have to add additional relationships, and for this we need to be able to see all of our tables. The only table that we don't need to include on this display over here is analysis questions, which is not going to have a relationship to anything else. It's kind of its own thing. To go and add the other tables, I can either click to add this Add Tables pane to the right side here, and I can select the names of the tables that I want, and I can go and choose them that way. So like if I want to add districts, I can go ahead, select it, tell it to add it, or I can go and just drag the tables over from the Objects pane onto the grid here. So I'm going to add the last table here, which is schools. In the instructions, we're telling you specifically what you need to do in terms of which relationships you should be creating between which fields. But in general, when you're creating relationships on your own, try to take a look at the names of your different fields. And sometimes the names of the tables too. They're generally going to kind of give you a good hint as to what should be related. For example, we have a district field here in the districts table and a district field here in district statistics. That's a pretty good sign that there's probably going to be a relationship there. And in fact, that's actually the first relationship that is listed in the instructions. When you go and create a relationship, you want to go and select the field that's going to be part of the parent table. There's kind of this idea that you have kind of a parent table with a relationship, and then there is a related table. The parent table is the one that's going to have the main version of that particular record. For example, if we're dealing with districts, we can see that the districts table has this district field. Over in district statistics, we have district as well. But you know, if we're thinking about statistics for a district, which is what this table goes and stores, it's probably not going to be as good of a fit for being our parent table as the one that actually stores the districts themselves. We want districts to be our parent table. Having a field be part of a key is a good indicator that it should probably be part of the parent table. Now in this case here, district on both sides is part of the key, but it is the primary key in the districts table and part of a composite key in district statistics. So that kind of leads us towards using it from districts as our primary table, the parent table. That's the one that we're going to go and drag from. So I'm going to click on district under the districts table, since that's going to be my parent table, and I will go drag down to district under district statistics. In the instructions, we actually also specifically list table and related table, but we want to have it between the district field in districts and the district field in district statistics. And the instructions say that we want to enforce referential integrity, but we do not want to enable cascade updates or deletes. So I'm going to go ahead and click create, and you'll see we get this line made for our relationship. And because I went and enabled referential integrity, we also see it's a little bit bolder here, and we can see that this is a one-to-many relationship. If I double click on the line, I can edit the properties. If I don't have referential integrity selected, it's not going to display this one-to-many, or sometimes you might see one-to-one or many-to-many type relationship with the little symbols indicated there. Having correctly selected which table is going to be the parent one and which one's going to be the related is really something that comes into play when you're using referential integrity. If you're not using referential integrity, it doesn't matter too much. But referential integrity is a good thing to go and use because it helps protect against orphaned records where you have data floating out there that just isn't really tied into any other piece of data. That kind of makes it hard to use that information and can cause some problems with your database queries. So referential integrity is generally a good thing. Cascade updates and deletes we've talked about in some other videos. Cascade updates says that if I go and change the record in my parent table, so if I were to change the name of a district in the districts table, it's going to go and automatically update the name of the district in the district statistics table so that things stay in sync. Right now, where I don't have Cascade updates enabled, what would happen is if I tried to change the name of a district that had corresponding records in district statistics, it just wouldn't let me make that change because that would go and create orphaned records. Cascade Delete is sort of the same, except for it deals with deleting records rather than updating them. So with Cascade Delete, if I go and delete the record for a district in the districts table, it's going to delete the records for any school years for that district in the district statistics table. If it's unchecked, like I have now, it just won't let me delete that district record in the first place. Cascade Updates is fairly safe. You can't really normally cause too much trouble when you're doing updates as long as you don't update things to really weird values or stuff like that. Occasionally you can run into some problems. But Cascade Deletes is something that can be very dangerous because if you accidentally, for example, delete one record here in the districts table, it's going to delete several records over in district statistics. And sometimes if you have chains of Cascade Deletes, you can end up with deleted records all over your database. And once you delete data in a database, it's hard to get it back. You can't just undo. So I would encourage you to be really thoughtful before you would go and enable Cascade Deletes. But that's our first relationship. Let's go ahead and set up our next relationship, which is going to be between district statistics as the parent table and school statistics. And here we're going to have it between the school year field here and the school year field here. And we're also going to tie together the district field here with managing district here in school statistics. Normally in CS 101 assignments, the names are going to be identical or almost identical between the fields that are to be related. And that's something that you'll see fairly commonly in real-world databases too, although we've been very intentional in that design with CS 101. Sometimes you don't see it quite as much when you're dealing with real-world databases. But we're going to go ahead and make this relationship, and since district and school year are part of the composite key here in district statistics, and they're not part of a key in school statistics, that is part of the reason why we're going through and using district statistics as the parent table here. To get things started, I'm going to select district from district statistics, and I'm going to go drag over to managing district, which is the corresponding field in school statistics. It's going to bring up this edit relationships window. I need to select my second field, and that was going to be the school year. So it'll give me a drop-down list with the fields that are in that table, and I can just choose the one that I want. I need to define all the fields that are going to be involved in the relationship at this stage. I can't, create districts relationship and then create a second line dragging over for school year. I got to do it all in one shot. I'm going to enforce referential integrity as the instructions tell us, and we'll click create here. And then we have one last relationship that we're going to make, and it's between the school ID field in schools and the school ID field in school statistics. And again, because we have a primary key here and this is not a key here, we're going to have schools be our parent table. So I'm going to take school ID under schools and drag over school ID under school statistics, and we'll enforce referential integrity and click create. So this is basically the setup that we have here between the sort of 5 core tables. Analysis questions is not going to be tied into any relationships in any of the CS 101 assignments, since it doesn't actually deal with the data fields that we're actually storing as assignment. It's sort of its own thing to answer those analysis questions. That's why that's not involved in a relationship. We want to go ahead and save our changes when we're done with the relationships window. That's going to kind of lock in the positioning and all of our settings here. And we can go ahead and close. And at this point, we're done with all the configuration for this database. Let's take a look at the analysis question for this project. I'm going to go into the analysis questions table by double-clicking on it, and I'm going to create a new record for my answer. And this is going to be question 7A. The question prompts asks if there is a relationship between students' attendance and their academic achievement, and we're told that we should say why we think that is the case or not. When I was taking a look at this problem, I went and grabbed the attendance rate and math proficiency rates from the school statistics table and took them over to Excel. And I did a correlation analysis using the correl function. I found that there was a 0.438 correlation, which is a fairly strong correlation between the two. And that kind of makes sense. If you're attending class regularly, you're going to be better able to actually get the lessons and hopefully learn the material. You're also going to have access to the teachers to be able to ask questions. So if you're coming to class regularly, you're probably going to do better than people who have sporadic attendance. So that's pretty much what I wrote with my answer here. Go ahead and close out the analysis questions table. The last thing we need to do with this file is to go and run the compact and repair database utility. That's on the database tools ribbon, and it's this compact and repair database button. I'm going to go ahead and click it, and you'll see it just quickly goes and modifies my database, and basically what it does is it shrinks the size of the file, make it easier to upload. You might get an error indicating that your file is in use, and that's especially likely to occur if you're working with Dropbox or OneDrive or some sort of file syncing utility that might be trying to access the file at the same time that Microsoft Access is trying to compact it. If you run into that sort of error, you may need to temporarily pause the file syncing to allow you to go and run compact and repair database. Antivirus programs will occasionally have issues, but in modern programs within the last couple of years, that's been pretty rare. Generally, if you're going to run into a problem, it's probably because of Dropbox or OneDrive. At this point, we're done with this project. You'll want to exit out of Access and submit this file.